Dan Perry joins us. Dan is the former Middle East and Europe editor for the Associated Press. And I think my question, Dan, going into all of this is if Iran does make any kind of an offer that Trump can in any way say out loud with a straight face is reasonable, will he then accept it? Do you think that's the mindset he has?
I tend to think so, yes, because it's clear the war is unpopular and he has the midterms coming up, and it's not clear how much more can be achieved other than persuading Iran to accept certain things. And I think probably the deal that may be in the offing is to have them back off on the Strait of Hormuz and turning it into a toll booth, and to accept that they won't have nuclear weapons. And I suspect that conceivably Trump can agree to civilian level enrichment, which in theory Iran should have the right to do because they're a signatory to the NPT. Now, it's a little bit brutal to accept that the regime stays. However, the regime has been so degraded and so humiliated, realistically, no matter what kind of a brave face they put on it, that I think there is some hope. There is some potential cause to hope for the Americans and the Israelis that protests will resume, and infighting that we keep hearing about within the IRGC and the military is real, and the regime's days are numbered.
So the idea of eventual regime change and/or overthrow, you think actually could happen at some point?
I mean, it simply could never have happened with air power alone.
Right.
And neither the Israelis nor the Americans are going to go in with boots on the ground. And the idea that the Kurds are going to do it, it was never serious. So it always had to be that, weakening the regime, causing them such damage, potentially imperiling the ability of the criminals who are in charge in Iran to hold on to their plunder, such that they turn on each other in an effort to save their skin.
You know, you'd be an interesting person to ask about this conversation we started with our previous guest, which was like this post-war scenario. What does it look like with the American allies who have been going back and forth with the president, Europe for the most part? But I want to add one other voice to all of that. This is a Politico article quoting Kurt Volker, who's on the show all the time, former NATO ambassador, who says it's a very big mistake to be criticizing Trump on Iran if you're one of these NATO countries. But essentially his argument is they'd be better off, for their own interest, they just keep their mouth shut about Trump and you know, let time pass. What do you say?
Look, I mean, I think Kurt generally makes sense, and there's a logic there. But when you speak of mistakes, you have to look at what is the goal. For example, is their goal to satisfy their own domestic public opinion? Trump is despised across Europe to a degree that is truly stupefying. And the European leaders have to deal with that as well. I think they've written Trump off. The real question in Europe is whether when Trump is gone in 2.5 years or whatever it is, can the alliance return to what it was? Does the U.S. want to lead the West and the democratic world? Or has the U.S. become a country where it's seemingly natural for the president to prefer Putin to his democratic allies? So you know very well, Connell, my position that Trump is making a mistake in demeaning and belittling Europe and in being indifferent to NATO. That said, however, the Europeans are not being wise, not just in criticizing Trump. I mean, there's something infantile about the idea that he can't take criticism, but that they can't get over their hatred of Trump. I understand clearly where they're coming from, but the idea that they oppose the war against Iran risks putting them in a position where they're aligned with one of the most horrific criminal regimes of the modern era. And Trump is right when he says that it's in their interest to help the U.S. open up the Strait of Hormuz.
So you think if another American president was doing this, Macron and some of these guys would be on board?
No doubt about it.
And it's an interesting component. I mean, that's what we call here Trump derangement syndrome, or what people call, right?
Look, I mean, who's deranged, Macron or Trump, who was seeming to threaten Denmark with invasion because he felt like grabbing Greenland as of January? I mean, you have a multi-directional derangement here, and Trump obviously was never that interested in you know, working with his allies in Europe. He doesn't like democracies that much. That's just the truth.
I'll be thinking about that line all weekend. We have that's our world leaders. We have multi-directional derangement from Dan Perry. Yes, a wordsmith. Thank you, Dan. What a world.